LiberalViewer presents.
So, never before in U.S. history has the winner of a presidential election questioned the legitimacy of millions of votes in his own election victory, but President Donald Trump apparently still can't accept losing the popular vote by over 2 million, complaining in his first meeting with Senate leaders about millions of illegal votes, leading Trump's press secretary Sean Spicer to spend more than 10% of his second press conference fielding the over half a dozen reporters' questions on the topic I've spliced together for you here.
Does the president believe that millions voted illegally in this election, and what evidence do you have of widespread voter fraud in this election, if that's the case?
The president does believe that. He has stated that before. I think he stated his concerns of voter fraud and people voting illegally during the campaign. And he continues to maintain that belief based on studies and evidence that people have presented to him.
But exactly what evidence? Speaker Ryan today said there's no evidence. The National Association of Secretaries of State say that they don't agree with the president's assessment. What evidence do you have?
As I said, I think the president has believed that for a while based on studies and information he has. John Roberts.
Sean, when you were talking about that voter fraud, are you going to ask for an investigation? Is the White House going to formally ask for a probe into this alleged
No, I think he
fraud?
won very, very handily with 306 electoral votes, 33 states. He's very comfortable with his win, but I think...
to trouble him if he's bringing it up.
I think he was having a discussion with some folks and mentioned something in passing, which has been a long-standing belief that he's maintained. This isn't the first time that you've heard this concern of his. Trey?
It's not, but I think it's worth clarifying whether illegal ballots or illegal immigrants...
And I think there's been studies. There was
being
one that came out of Pew in 2008 that showed 14% of people who have voted were non-citizens. There's other studies that have been presented to him. It's a belief he maintains. I mean,
just that they were counted improperly, as Dick Durbin says the president personally told him last night. It was that the people who voted
I think
so
I've asked and answered it. It's a belief that he's maintained for a while, a concern that he has about voter fraud, and that's based on information that's provided. Trey.
Thanks, Sean.
Cecilia.
Yeah.
If 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, that is a scandal of astronomical proportions. Doesn't he want to restore Americans' faith in their ballot system? Wouldn't he want an investigation of this?
Well,
this is a
but Mara,
scandal.
as I've noted several times now, he's believed this for a long time, and I think he won fairly overwhelmingly. So he's not. And look, we'll work.
I'm asking you, why not investigate something
Well,
that is
maybe we will.
the biggest scandal in American electoral history? 3 to 5 million people voting illegally.
I think we'll see where we go from here. But right now, the focus that the president has is on putting Americans back to work. It was a comment that he made on a long-standing belief in the back. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Jeff.
You said the president believes that there was voter fraud. I wonder if you believe that. You were at the Republican National Committee at the time, and Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was the chairman of the RNC at the time. Do you believe there was widespread voter fraud?
My job
And
is not. Look,
how can he be comfortable with his win if he believes
He's very
that there
comfortable
was
with his
3
win.
million votes? Maybe he didn't win.
No, he's very comfortable with his win. It's an electoral-based system. He got 306 electoral votes. 33 of 50 states voted for him. I think, look, Jeff, I've asked and answered this question twice. He believes what he believes based on the information he's provided. Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean for democracy, though, Sean? What does that
Thanks,
mean?
Jeff.
If he does believe that, what does that mean for democracy,
It means
Sean?
that, yeah, I've answered your question.
Have you?
Hallie Jackson.
Thanks, Sean. 2 topics for it, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First one, and really not to belabor a point here, but you said that the president has believed for a while that there is widespread voter fraud. But only 4 days ago did he get the power of the presidency to be able to do something about it. So why not definitively say that he will investigate if he believes, in the administration position, is that there was massive voter fraud?
Well, first of all, the comment that he made was, he said 3 to 5 million people, could have voted illegally, based on the studies that he's seen. But he's very clear that he won the election based on the 306 electoral votes that he got. We're here on day 2. I think let's not prejudge what we may or may not do in the future.
If he lost, would you be upset?
Of course he'd be upset. Who wouldn't be upset if they lost?
But he's not upset. I mean, about the vote.
No, but I mean, that's not how the election is held in our country, by electoral votes. He won overwhelming with 306 electoral votes, the most since any Republican since Reagan. He's very comfortable with the depth and breadth of the support that he got from the American people and the 33 states that voted for him, the 9 of 13 battleground states, the 2,600 counties. He's very, very pleased with that. Yeah. Kristen.
Sean, thank you. I just want to be clear about this investigation because it seems like you potentially opened the door for one. Have you discussed with the president the
Which
possibility
investigation are you referring
of
to?
possibly investigating this voter fraud?
No, I didn't. I did not. No, I did not.
Because you said it's possible.
No, of course, anything's possible. I think at some point, look, I was asked a question. There is no investigation. I said it was possible. Anything is possible. It was a hypothetical question. My point to you is that to ask us on day 2, he made a comment last night on something that he has believed and said for a long, long time. And the question that was asked to me is whether or not, so it's been asked and answered.
Wow, that was a pretty stunning claim brushed off with absolutely no evidence, which is actually how most of the mainstream media covered the end of that press conference, starting with a stunned Brooke Baldwin talking to political reporter David Chalian on CNN in this clip.
All right, so as Sean Spicer walks out of the briefing room, that was stunning. Let me just reiterate exactly what White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer just said. That the President of the United States vis-a-vis Sean Spicer, still believes that millions of votes were cast illegally in this historic presidential election, which begs the question, what evidence does he have? Is this an alternative fact? Let me bring in my panel, beginning with you, David Chalian. We'll get to Jeff Zeleny in a second, who got a question, was in the briefing room. But David Chalian, this would be if true, this would be the biggest presidential election story in history. Where is the evidence?
Well, Sean did not provide any evidence other than to cite some studies that Donald Trump's been made aware of that they've cited in the past and that have been thoroughly debunked. Brooke, it's no other question mattered in that room today. This is nothing short of astonishing. This is not just some bright, shiny object that the press is going to obsess about. This is the President of the United States spokesperson who, on behalf of the President, just said that he continues to believe that there's this massive voter fraud of some 3 million illegal votes cast in the election he won, by the way, and that he continues to believe this. And it is, to me, it is just the President of the United States thoroughly undermining the very small d democratic foundations of the country. No other policy question really matters at that point. That's a threshold question. And I think now the burden is on this president to put forward actual reputable proof, if any exists, of where these claims are.
Yes. David, stay with me. Let me just underscore, you said this would undermine democracy.
So that analysis on CNN seemed reasonable for the circumstances, pointing out the huge implications for American democracy if Trump's claim about illegal voters were true, while also pointing out the huge lack of any evidence to back up the claim, which is similar to the way the end of the press conference was covered on MSNBC, first with fact-checking by anchor Katie Tour and then analysis from legal correspondent Ari Melber, actually using the L word, calling it a lie from Donald Trump by the end of this clip.
There, right there, Sean Spicer, Donald Trump's White House press secretary, leaving the briefing room after today, his second briefing. Spent a lot of time talking about the claim that Donald Trump made yesterday in a closed-door meet and greet with Senate leadership, talking about how he believes that 2 to 3 million people voted illegally. Illegal immigrants, he said, voted illegally in this election. We want to do a little bit of fact-checking on that statement because the White House now is referring to the same research that the campaign had referred to and the transition had referred to. One was a Washington Post commission study, which the Washington Post itself debunked. The other one was a Pew study from 2012, which is actually from 2008, which said that approximately 24 million, 1 in every 8 people, are on voter registrations in the United States that are no longer valid, and they are significantly inaccurate, listing people who had died in the past, obviously, on the voter rolls. It does not mention anything when it comes to undocumented immigrants, so their basis of evidence here isn't quite correct at all. We want to go to Ari Melber, our chief legal correspondent here at MSNBC, to break this down a little bit more. Ari, you and I were talking about this while this briefing was going on. It seems like if you're going to question voting and say that 2 to 3 million people voted illegally, that is a major story. That is something that calls for an immediate investigation. That is the foundation of our democracy. If we're not voting legally, if you can't trust our voting practices, how can you trust that anything we do is democratic?
That's right. Sean Spicer, as you mentioned, made several claims and suggestions that have been repeatedly and widely debunked. We show the government's claims, as we just did. Now we will have to debunk them because what he said was false. There is no widespread evidence of massive voter fraud in California or elsewhere. Indeed, all of this is carefully regulated by state and federal authorities and secretaries of state, more of whom happen to be elected Republicans and Democrats. None of these local state and officials have ever supported any of this throughout the process, and they all have their own vested interests in our federalist system. 50 different election systems, plus the Justice Department's oversight. On top of that, the factual suggestions that he did make were widely known to be false because the Trump campaign has tried this before, and Sean Spicer, before this position, was, of course, RNC spokesman. So he knows from that time when Jason Miller and others mischaracterized the study. They were rebutted at the time. David Becker, the nonpartisan voting expert, the author of the Pew Report, said at the time back in October and November that he was being miscited. He said that again and used social media today to emphasize that. So at a certain point, when you have an obligation to get your facts right and you state them, it is more than just a misunderstanding. It looks like, based on what we know, a mischaracterization on the part of Sean Spicer, what we just saw, and from Donald Trump, a direct lie, given how repeatedly and clearly he has mischaracterized this.
So MSNBC actually called Trump a liar over this, and both CNN and MSNBC thoroughly and specifically debunked the claim and focused on it as a huge story, but that was definitely not the case over in the alternative fact world of Fox News, where both supposedly straight news anchor Melissa Francis and her first guest commentator focused on Trump Press Secretary Sean Spicer not cutting off the questioning of the topic quickly enough, rather than the big lie itself in this clip.
All right, that was it. You heard it. His second press conference of the week from the podium, wrapping up here. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Francis. Let's bring in Simon Rosenberg. He is president and founder of NDN and a former Bill Clinton campaign advisor. We have Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Thank you so much for joining us. Matt, let me start with you. He got sucked into the vortex there a couple times of talking about that whole idea of how many illegal voters may or may not have voted in the last election. He addressed it at least twice. He then kind of went with the asked and answered, and then he got back into it again. Why?
Well, he's being very solicitous to the press assembled there. He's allowing them to ask more than one question. These briefings are long. And, there's a light spirit about it. And my guess is as the days go forward, Melissa, he's going to say that he's already answered the question and move on. There's a great line from the House of Parliament in the UK when they say, I refer to the gentleman to the answer I gave some moments ago.
Asked and
He's going to have to learn that answer, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Absolutely. That was some major spin coming not just from the conservative guest, but from the supposedly straight news anchor. And even when Fox News let the commentator from the left speak and point out the falsity of this illegal voter claim, the Fox News anchor still argued on the other side, injecting a counterpoint about a false news story claiming Trump removed a bust of Martin Luther King from the Oval Office here.
I mean, Simon, there were other questions that came by that he said very politely, I haven't talked to him about that. I'm going to, and, when I hear more, I'll get back to you. There are other things he said I just can't tell you at the time. The speed of his answers, I'm sitting here with Shannon Bream. We were appreciating that. He kind of whipped through things, but he did engage on that question of the illegal voters a number of times, which makes me think it's deliberate and they're trying to keep that conversation alive.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe. But listen, I know Sean Spicer, and I've been on panels with him, and he's a very smart guy. I mean, I think it's been a bumpy first few days for him. This is a very tough job. It's a new administration with very few people who have experience of working in the White House, and so I think it's going to be bumpy for some time. But I think that it's unfortunate for Donald Trump that there are these questions about truthfulness continuing to come out, whether it was on the what happened with the march, and then now this issue of the illegal voting, which clearly did not happen. Let's just be clear.
Or the Martin Luther King bust is another thing that clearly did not happen. That wasn't his fault. So
right. So I think that this is part of what the American people are going to realize, that this is going to be a bumpy ride for a few months with the Trump administration, and let's hope for the country that things settle down.
Matt, and let me bring it to the other big issue of the day, which would be that executive order that he signed on numerous pipelines.
So Fox News changed the subject as quickly as possible there, much more quickly than the other two networks, and when the guest from the left raised questions of truthfulness because the illegal voting clearly did not happen, the Fox News anchor immediately changed the subject there, too. Especially when compared to the coverage on CNN and MSNBC, the spin, the lack of fact-checking, and the clear bias in favor of Donald Trump is obvious, I think, but I want to know what you think. Do you agree CNN and MSNBC reacted to that press conference like news outlets, while Fox News was mostly pro-Trump administration spin? And regarding the Trump lie itself, why is Donald Trump continuing to question the legality of millions of votes in a presidential election he won?
YouTube, you decide.